So thank you very much. And before the clock starts, my conflict has been shuffled. So if I'm happy to go first, but I don't want to impinge on you if you'd like to go.
Please go ahead and set the table.
Thank you. Ms. Valentine, it is such a pleasure to see you and have all your expertise here. Learned so much from you through the years. And I mention that in part because I want to apologize because I'm going to start at a second grade leading level because I don't want to lose any of my colleagues. If I'm looking right now, I'm just Googling on my phone, Henry Hub spot price of natural gas, $3.76 per million BTU. The price of coal has surged. It's about $133 a ton. If I'm doing the math right, that's almost $6.50 per million BTU. And I can't find a spot price for sunlight and wind. Am I correct in assuming that the price of sun and wind is 0 per MMBTU?
You are correct.
Thank you. I was glad I didn't look it up wrong. The price of power is averaging about $49 a megawatt hour right now. So it sounds to me like if we built solar and wind panels that were using zero cost fuel and turning it into something worth $49, we would generate a return on investment. Do I have that about right?
I'm going to trust you on it.
All right. well,
7 to 12% return.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Return.
Okay, so now, if I think the price of solar and wind right now is running $1,000 a kilowatt, maybe installed, something in those neighborhoods. And the last time I looked, transmission and distribution, the full system is a weird way to look at it, but I did a little piece of math, roughly $1,500 per delivered kilowatt when you sort of run through the whole system is ballpark-ish. I see some heads nodding. Okay. So almost basically more than half of the capital cost we have to amortize in the system is the transmission system. And I quite agree with, I think with all our witnesses that permitting is a real problem and it's a big chunk of that cost. We did have in the American Jobs Plan that the president proposed a standard office of transmission. Unfortunately, we didn't get that in the bipartisan package and we can't do policy and reconciliation. But I would hope on a bipartisan consensus we can streamline that permitting process in some future bill. My first question, though, for you, Ms. Ballantyne, is we run about 7% losses in the system on the transmission and distribution grid. And so if more than half of the cost of the system, that is going to lower our cost of energy, because I think we just said 12% return, great, that exceeds GDP, let's do it. But if more than half of that cost of the system is in the transmission system and we're losing 7% of it on the way from the generator to the load, are we doing enough to make sure that we are first building generation closest to the load where we can avoid those losses, or are there other things we should be thinking about in that regard?
So I would answer your question directly that we're not doing enough in two regards. You're right, we should be looking at building generation close to load, no question about it. However, as we know, that zero marginal cost, wind, solar, geothermal, hydropower, there's a whole suite, not just wind and solar, of zero marginal cost renewable energy sources. They're not evenly distributed across the country.
Sure.
So we have to invest in advanced transmission as well. It's a critical piece of the pie. And today, interconnection queues are slowing down electrons getting from where projects can be built to where customers' loads are.
Yeah.
We need 2 to 3 times the transmission that we're going to have today. And every bit of investment that's in this act is going to help that.
Well, I quite agree, and thank you for raising the point. And I just want to make sure, and as my colleagues know, I'm a big fan of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I hope as they can streamline some of these permitting processes and make sure that we build the transmission where it should go in a streamlined fashion, but also fix those downstream market issues. Ms. Jaffe, I want to start again, and I apologize, it's so simple. All else equal, if demand goes down, does price go up or down?
If demand goes down, price goes down.
Awesome. So if we reduce the demand for natural gas by building solar and wind, if we reduce the demand for oil, we're going to lower the price of gas and oil. Do I have that about right?
That is correct.
Awesome. Mr. Graves, you'll be so delighted. We're going to lower the price of consumers across the board. This is fantastic news. Now, if you could just help us out, Ms. Jaffe, because as I look at the last 7-8 months, it looks like the demand for natural gas in the U.S., the demand for oil has not dramatically increased, and yet the price has gone up. and wellhead counts have fallen and exports have surged. Can you explain to us how it is that collapsing wellheads and surging exports might account for some of the increase in fossil fuel prices over the last 7 months?
So I think the way you've described it is not really accurate. What actually happened is we had a huge, unprecedented collapse in demand for both oil and natural gas in 2020 because of COVID. Many American companies stopped drilling, not having anything to do with federal policy, but simply because there was no demand because of COVID, and they were losing huge amounts of money. And then because of the success of the vaccine rollout, we had a sudden reopening of our economy. We had 6% growth, which is unprecedented. I think I can't think of the last time, maybe the 50s, when we had 6% growth in the United States. And that sudden resurgence of sudden demand in the United States, more people driving their cars, meant that we, together with the recovery in the rest of the world, created a situation where the cutbacks that we saw in 2020 could not be immediately reversed. That gave OPEC power, and they used that power.